Hello, friends, and welcome back to Ridgeviews Podcast. We are so glad that you've joined us. We try to cover all things hope, healing, and recovery related. We hope you're enjoying our new intro. As we said in our first episode with the new look, things have changed as the COVID-19 helpline will be going away at the end of June. It's my distinct pleasure to have special guest Richard Moseley. Richard, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Glad you're here. So, as I recall, I think you and I were having a little discussion over the coffee machine in the staff lounge, and somehow the podcast came up, and I can't remember if you said or I said, but there was an immediate oh man, we need to have you on. You need to come tell your story. You need to talk about what you do. And you were all like, yeah, let's do it. That's part of what we do. So it seems like a natural opportunity to have you be part of this.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I always kind of push myself to do things that are uncomfortable because that's kind of how I try to grow as an individual. So pushing things that kind of make me uncomfortable is kind of the way that I've learned to grow, because you don't experience new things and there's possibly great things you experience from
I
doing it.
love that philosophy of life. Yeah, that's great. Reminds me a lot of myself. So that's actually in part why this podcast even exists. It certainly wasn't in my comfort zone either. Mm-hmm. So let's just start at the beginning. I had just concluded a podcast with Kaylee Peevler, and at a point of that podcast came up this concept that we all have a story. And as you and I were sitting here getting ready, you said we all have a story. And it's like, well, that's the perfect place to begin. So tell me a little bit about your story.
Well, my story really begins why I came to this field of working in mental health and working with people with mental illness and substance abuse is because I've had my own lived experience with mental illness and substance use, where I had really, when I talk about my recovery, it's really easier to focus on what I was feeling, because people understand feelings a lot better than diagnoses and things like that. But there's three things that really encompass my recovery and my struggle, and that is fear, shame, and sadness.
I think those are all feelings everyone has experienced at some point. So nice place to begin. Yeah.
So with the fear, I had this constant fear of failure. I just wanted to please everyone. I didn't like anybody being mad at me. And I was just constantly afraid something bad would happen. I was afraid of being ridiculed, right? Sometimes we have to have constructive criticism to grow. But earlier in my recovery, I took that all as like, I'm not a good person. I'm not doing good. I had a fear of letting people down. A fear of my family members dying, just these thoughts that would come to me. Fear of trying anything new, because in trying anything new, you kind of only see the consequences. That's the only thing I saw was none of the positive, just the consequences. I kind of had this magical thinking where I felt like whatever I thought would come true, or fearing ending up of some of my family members who, when my father passed away from due to his mental illness, or other family members who had that substance abuse issue. And that's that first major struggle that I had. The other one was this shame that I felt. Having all these feelings and having these thoughts come to my head, you just think you're a horrible person. Why would anybody think these bad thoughts? I was constantly afraid that, I had this fear that I'm going to hell, because why would I think these thoughts? And then lastly, just because of those two feelings, I had that sadness where, because I felt that these things would never go away, I would never be happy at all. I never would get the life that I wanted. And a lot of times I would just sleep for long periods of time just so that I didn't feel sad, and I would just dream. And I developed a lot of poor coping skills where it probably hurt me more than it helped me. That way that I could deal with those feelings.
So what age did the identification of these feelings kind of emerge and become strongest? Was this adolescence? Was it early adulthood?
It was adolescence, probably as early as the earliest I can remember, probably third grade, where I had these thoughts and I did not like them. I know I didn't like them, and I hated these feelings. But even early on, there was something that really changed my life, and that was that turning point. And a lot of people, I feel like, who go through successful recovery, that catalyst is normally a person. And I was really, really lucky that my mother was there for me. A lot of people going through recovery normally have a support that really helps them along that process. And my mother was that support. And the thing is that people always talk about that one giant turning point. I felt like I had multiple turning points because every time I had a problem, she was kind of there for me. When I developed a poor coping skill, she pointed out that this wasn't helping. And she would help me come in contact with people who could help me. She got me to see doctors. When she didn't know something about the illness, she studied it so that she would gain knowledge to know how to better to help me. And also, I really didn't think about these things as I was growing up. I really didn't think about it until I got into high school or college level where, wow, how am I here? Mm-hmm. I kind of asked that question to myself is, how am I here? It's because she helped me with the tools that I needed. And then when she passed away in October, that's when I truly reflected on the life that she had given me, that catalyst of giving me the things that I needed to live the life that I wanted.
You know, you brought up, the power of story, but you also mentioned shame as being one of those feelings that really impacted you heavily. And I can't help but be reminded of, and I hope I don't butcher this, but Brene Brown talks about if people can share their story with someone who will listen with empathy and understanding, shame can't survive. And so I'm thinking of your mom. You know, what a person that can listen to your story with empathy and understanding, and have a level of curiosity about what might be some of the factors at play. How can I get him connected to resources in the community? I can't help. I hate to interrupt your story,
You're fine.
but it made me think, man, these factors kind of come to play as you're sharing your story.
Yeah, definitely. And thinking about the tools that she helped me with, and thinking about shame, thinking about medications, right? There's a lot of times there's a shame associated. You take psychiatric medicine, but her encouraging me, like, it's just like any other disease, right? You don't make fun of somebody who has diabetes that they take their insulin, or somebody who has a headache, they take something for their headache, right? It's medication is there to help us live the life that we kind of want to live, and shouldn't be ashamed of that we're living a happy life.
Right. It's almost, you brought up wellness earlier, and I it makes me think of that SAMHSA and the recovery principles. I think there may be 10 of them. But I think people too often assume that is specific to substance use recovery. And really, those principles are applicable to whole wellness. I mean, that everyone is on this continuum of recovery of wellness. Mm-hmm. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Recovery is that process. It's a constant process. Even through all the things that I've gone through, I'm still, struggle with things. But with that catalyst of a person helping me, my mom, that she kind of helped me find those tools, those learning about the process of recovery, knowing that there are different pathways to recovery. There are different ways. Pathways to recovery are very individualized. Mm. So the medication she helped me getting on, that's very individualized. And that was a process in and of itself, finding the right one that works for you. Therapy and psychiatrists, finding the one that you want to work with and the one who feels like understands you, and having those supports are really helpful, because especially with psychiatry and therapy for me, was they helped me understand why I was feeling that way. And the feelings and thoughts that I have did not make me that bad person. And developing those, I always talk about good and bad coping skills, things that we do to deal with our emotions, that recognizing why it's bad for us, and then finding ones that work best for us. And that is so individualized about that recovery process, that everybody doesn't have to be the same. Everybody's not the same. Everybody's recovery will be different.
Yeah, what a thing to honor in each and everybody. I would suspect, based on your experience and your own insight into your story, I bet you're a pretty good coach.
Yeah, I'm a peer wellness coach, and so I kind of use my own experience with my recovery to kind of, a lot of times when you see somebody get through a struggle, especially if it's very similar to you, that's what's so great about I'm a peer recovery specialist, about helping others who've had lived experience and walking the same path they've kind of walked before, of trying to go through recovery and jumping through things to find.
Yeah. We were chatting before we started recording this, and I think you and I both thought, you know what, there's so much here, it may be worth 2 episodes. One, just to get to know Richard's story. The other is how you have taken your lived experience and turned it into a career, into helping other people. And meeting people where they are and their recovery story. So I don't want to get too far ahead of that, because I want to save it for that piece. Are there other parts of your story that you want to make sure are shared?
One of the things that I always like to share is my accomplishments. And that's not because it's a pride thing or anything like that. It's about, I was able to accomplish these things because of my recovery. I have a master's in counseling. If you talk to little old me in 3rd grade, telling him you get a master's in counseling, I would never have believed it. I have a job that I love, right? I never thought I would, especially when I first started working and worked at McDonald's. Man, work will never be fun. And then I'm like, yeah, there are not. Everybody has their days, but I love my work because I'm wanting to help be like my mom was to me, being that catalyst for somebody. Just one person makes me feel like I've done the job of a lifetime. Just one person.
Well, I can tell when you just said that, your volume went up, your smile went up. It's clear you enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah. And I do things now that I was deathly afraid of doing. Talking in public. I now talk in public a lot more than I used to. I'm a trainer now. I train people in being peer recovery specialist, and I thought I would never do that. Just little pushes have helped me overcome my fears. And those little fears are always going to be there, but I can always push back against it.
Yeah. Now, I remember distinctly in college, I was petrified to stand before the class and say anything, and a professor told me, it happens in small little increments. Just start with a sentence. Do the next time 2 sentences and work your way up. And look, here we are. We're having this conversation that's going to go over the airwaves. So it's pretty cool. What advice do you have if someone is listening to this for the first time, before we, in part 2, get into part of what a peer recovery coach does, peer wellness coach does? What advice do you have for someone?
One of the funny thing you should say that about advice is, as a peer recovery specialist, is that we don't really like the word advice. Because advice implies that you kind of telling somebody what to do. And a lot of times, especially when you learn to talk to people, is that a lot of times we have the answers. It just takes a little bit of pulling out. So if somebody needs help, you find the person that listens to you. Rather than the person who gives advice, it's the person that listens to you that's wanting to understand you the best.
That sounds like good advice. I like that use of that word. And it brought us right back around to Brene Brown. If someone can share their story with someone who listens with empathy and understanding, shame can't survive. So there we have it. Richard, thank you so much. We need to have more coffee chats. Who knows what kind of ideas we may come up with. I appreciate you being here. You've agreed to come back next month. We'll do part 2, and we'll build on this conversation. And maybe even the PSC, PSR programs may use this in their own classes as part of their instruction. So thanks again for coming in. It's an honor to hear your story. And thank you, folks, for tuning in one more time. We hope you'll continue to subscribe, ring the bell so that you get notification of our latest episode. We really appreciate you taking time to listen to the content we have to offer. Take care, and we'll see you again next week.